Yes, it is Inauguration Eve. Inauguration Eve. Apparently, I've been saying that wrong. Not inauguration, inauguration. But as Tom Benson pointed out to me before the show, it only comes around once every 4 years. So, I mean, it could be expected that you get that word wrong, right?
You are forgiven.
So this is another edition of Beyond Reason Radio. I've been given the official forgiven sign from Tom Benson in the control room. Tom Benson is producing as well. And we have a lot to talk about. We're on Facebook Live as well. If you want to comment on Facebook Live, just send me a good old friend request on Facebook because we're friends anyways, and you should. Anyway, and you can text the show to 23680, and you can call 407-916-5400. So, the inauguration's tomorrow.
Finally.
Finally, yes, is the key word there. They're doing all kinds of inauguration coverage on all the news stations, which was kind of annoying to me. Nothing against Trump. It's just I wanted to go to some of these places today for, news. And they weren't doing news. They were doing concerts and inauguration festivities. I understand they have to do that, but still, it was just kind of annoying. And then we have all of the talk of the protests. All of the protests at the inauguration, all of the congressmen and senators boycotting the inauguration. What is up to 50 now, I think?
And the Mother's March.
The Women's
March, I think, yes, it is.
Yes, a Women's March.
Is Saturday.
I think they want 100,000 people there or something. None of these people even know why they're protesting anymore.
But did you hear the people who were organizing the one in D.C. are upset with the people in New York because all the people are going to New York and not coming to Washington, D.C. You're spoiling our party.
Well, not only that, but if you're a woman who is against Trump, but you're also pro-life, they won't let you in.
Oh, really?
Yeah, there was a big controversy about that. How you have to be a certain kind of feminist to be able to get into the protests of the Trump inauguration. So there's a lot to get to. What I really want to focus on today's episode of Beyond Reason Radio. Yeah, this is Beyond Reason Radio. I'm your host, Michael Yaffee, the voice of reason in a world that is beyond reason, as you know. And what I really want to focus on today is Obama's legacy. You want to call it? Because there's so much great. I don't want to call it great. It's great because it's laughable, I guess. It's very, very entertaining, very funny. There's so much stuff out there on Obama from certain parts of the media about how he is the greatest president of all time, the greatest Democrat. I see magazines, the Obama years, the praise of him, his farewell address. Remember, I criticized his farewell address because there were so many people that just can't understand. Mm-hmm. How could we go from Trump after this great messiah, Obama? And, I started thinking about this a lot because we're talking about the protest. We're talking about all the people who are boycotting Trump's inauguration. We're talking about all the people in the left that have just, Trump derangement syndrome, as some are calling it. Bud called it this morning Trumpophobia. I liked that. They have Trumpophobia. And Bud asked this morning to a lot of people, and I think it's a good question. What exactly are they afraid of?
I don't know.
And, I've thought about this. I've asked it on this show, too. What exactly do you think Trump is going to do? And I found there was an article on CNN, which I'm going to get to, Trump the Authoritarian. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to point out how Obama pretty much did all the things they're accusing Trump of doing. And it's really, you're talking about the authoritarian. But I want to get deeper into this, into the psychology of the average vote, the average person in America, the psychology of the average leftist. And actually, I don't think this is just unique to the left. I think there's a lot of people on the right like this as well. But we were talking about Obama's farewell address. And we were talking about just the praise of a president and how troubling it is that so many people, they're crying when he's leaving. They want 4 more years, and they can't name any of his accomplishments. I've read articles before and I'm going to get to it today, where they talk about why he's the greatest president, but they can't really name specific accomplishments. It's just because of who he is as a person. And I remember when Obama was inaugurated, I remember when he was elected, you had hope and change. You had him speaking overseas to thousands of people. He was in a stadium when he accepted the nomination, and all of this stuff and how people were feigning in the crowds. And I started thinking, we put so much of our hopes and dreams now into the presidency, into that one position, which is really absurd when you think about it. All the president is supposed to be, anyway, is he's supposed to control one branch of the federal government. He's just supposed to be in charge of the executive branch of the federal government. Now, that does include the military.
But a lot of the people who are upset about all this haven't been taught that. They don't teach that in school anymore.
You're right.
They don't know the judicial, the legislative, and executive branches of government.
You're exactly right on that. And that's what's so troubling. But I started thinking about that. If you have people out there who put all their hopes and dreams and wants into one leader, one person, one president, then when the other side gets in, that means they're going to do the exact opposite. When the other side gets in and gets power, which is inevitable, it's going to happen it's happened through our history. It's going to happen. It's always going to happen. But now that we have put so much into that office, when the other side gets in, that means all of those people are going to put their fears and their anxieties and their worries into that president, into that position.
I guess you would call it separation anxiety.
Well, yeah, it's separation anxiety. But when you believe in your soul that the president has that much responsibility, that the president has that much power, when it's someone you don't like who gets in, then all of a sudden you're freaked out. When it's someone you love, you worship him. You praise him as the savior of everything. But when it's someone you don't like, it becomes, well, he is going to destroy. It's not that, he'll do some policies I disagree with. It's that he is going to destroy the United States. He is going to destroy my life. And it's really absurd when you think about it. It's really not what this country was founded on. It's really not what this country is about. Because really, the only one who can destroy in this country, who can really destroy your life, other than maybe, if someone murders you or something. But I mean, for the most part, the only one that's stopping you from succeeding and stopping you from doing what you want to do is you. Is you as the individual. The person who really has power in your life is you, especially in this country. But we've done this thing now where we put it all onto the presidency and onto our federal government. And we've given them so much power, the opposite of what we were supposed to do. And now, when somebody else gets in, then we freak out. And why I say this is not unique to the left, I think this explains a lot of the protests. I think this explains a lot of the Trumpophobia. I think it explains the Trump derangement syndrome, as some are calling it, because now they're afraid because they put all this power into the presidency. But it's not necessarily unique to that side, because I had people who would call in the morning show all the time. I take calls because I'm the producer.
Mm-hmm.
They would call in and they would tell me, I think Obama's going to declare martial law.
Oh, I've heard that.
And yeah, he's going to declare martial law and Trump will never be president. I think Obama is going to, we kind of did this 8 years ago. Obama is going to destroy the country. I had people calling me, texting me, they call Hillary Killery. But they would say, if Hillary gets elected, America is over. Done. Never going to come back. I would hear this constantly. So I started, and it's because we put so much into that office. We put so much into the power of the presidency. And now we've become to a point that we're so divided, yet we have all this hope and dreams in the president, that if it's our guy, we worship and praise him. And there's a lot of Trump supporters that do that. I'm a kind of guy who, by the way, I'm going to talk about something he has planning that just came out today. That's great. That might make me the biggest Trump fan ever, believe it or not.
Really?
Yes, I know. He's been a mixed bag for me. Uh-huh. But instead of criticizing him based on the office he holds, criticizing when you do something he doesn't like, praising him when he does something you do like. It's a worship. It's a mindset. And it's the same thing with Obama. All these people spent 8 years defending him at all costs. But he's just the president. He just controls the executive branch. He just part of the government. He's still accountable to Congress. He's still accountable to the people. Now, don't misunderstand me. Obama was an extremely dangerous president. I really believe that. And I think it could have been, we're going to go over some of his major failures in this show today. And he was an extremely dangerous president. And I honestly believe if it were not for Republicans in Congress, even though the Republicans in Congress didn't do a lot I wanted, if it were not for them, things would be a lot worse today. If it were not for the Tea Party rising up in 2010, putting Republicans in Congress, and eventually being able to at least halt what Obama was doing, it would have ended up a lot worse. I mean, all you have to do is look at his attempts at gun control, look at his attempts at immigration, look at his proposed budgets, which were massive that even Democrats in his own party didn't like it. There was other stuff he wanted to do. He wanted to do cap and trade. So as much damage as he did, it could have been a whole lot worse if it weren't for Republicans in Congress. So I'm not saying that Obama wasn't a dangerous president. I'm not saying there can't be a dangerous president. I'm not saying we should be, apathetic on whoever the president is. But what I'm saying is we've gone so much to the other extreme, and we've done it on both sides, that when one side puts all their hopes and dreams into that one man as Messiah, and then that means when the other side gets in, they're going to put all their fears, all their anxiety, all their hatred into just that one office. So that's why you get major protests. That's why you have people boycotting the inauguration. That's why you have boycotts of companies that have CEOs that supported Trump. You have Steve Harvey, Jim Brown now being called Uncle Toms just because they merely met with Trump. They're being called Uncle Toms by some people. You have Snoop Dogg out there saying he will destroy any other black music artists that want to perform at Trump's inauguration, that he will do everything he can to ruin their careers. I mean, when you have, that's what happens. Part of it's politics, but that's my theory. That's my theory, that when you put all your hopes and dreams into that office, you will also put all your hatred, all your fears, and all your anxieties. And it's really not what this country is all about. It's not what we were founded on. I get passionate about this stuff because I want to limit the size of the federal government. I want to limit its role because I believe in the power of the individual instead, and free people. That's what makes this country great. You talk about make America great again. It's the people. It's individuals. It's the free market and individuals in a free country that are able to do that. What do you all think out there? Am I on to something about my theory? Am I on to something about why there's all this hatred of Trump? Then there's all this, frankly, some too much praise of Trump in some instances. 407-916-5400, text to 23680. Charles, we're going to go over some of Obama's legacy, what some people are saying, why they're right, why they're wrong, and a lot more to get to as well, including something Charles Krauthammer said that will give you a good laugh today. This is Beyond Reason Radio. I'm your host, Michael Yaffee. We'll be right back.
Listen to the latest episodes of Beyond Reason. Download the podcast at Spreaker.com. The voice of reason in a world that is beyond reason is back now.
Yes, welcome back to the show, everyone. You can text the show to 23680. This is Beyond Reason Radio, Orlando's smart talk radio, and you can call 407-916-5400. I just got a text in from someone that's a very astute, actually. I think he makes the point well. He says, we have shifted from policy politics to identity politics, which is very close to tribalism. So if you don't belong to my specific tribe, it is okay for me to denounce you, attack you, do anything in my power to bring you down. And as we know, anywhere that tribes still exist, there is war and death. Well, hopefully there won't be war and death here. I hope not. No civil wars here. But I think he makes a good point. I've talked about this on the show before. and I would encourage anyone to read the book Pendulum because it actually addresses this. We're a we society. We're an us versus them society. We care more about the group we're a part of, the tribe we're a part of, than the individual and what's, best for the individual. And that's what happens. And that's what we're seeing in this country right now. And it definitely explains this. So I found this, and I keep finding all this stuff incredibly fascinating because I'm finding articles where they're talking about how great of a president or a Democrat Obama was. But they can never really name his accomplishments. It was sort of, he was great because he was a nice guy. He was a great moral leader. He changed the mindset kind of thing. But it's never specific accomplishments, numbers, statistics that they can point to that he did very well. Like this article from David Leonhardt on New York Times. It's making all the rounds everywhere. He says the most successful Democrat since FDR. This is what he says about Obama. This is what he starts with. And actually, in some ways, he's right in a way, but mostly he's wrong. And I'll tell you what I mean by that in a sec. He said when Barack Obama ran for president in 2008, he understood without quite saying it that there had been no highly successful Democratic presidents in decades. Bill Clinton made the country a better place, but his biggest legislative plans failed, and he was beset by scandal. JFK, though popular in retrospect, had his agenda stalled in Congress when he was killed. Harry Truman left, deeply unpopular. Jimmy Carter lost re-election. And Lyndon Johnson, despite grand domestic achievements, was driven from office. The chant, "Hey, hey, LBJ, how many kids did you kill today?" So he's talking about how a lot of the liberal presidents in the past were failures. But this is why he thinks he's the best Democrat since FDR. He says the history of liberal disappointment was the subtext of a revealing early comment from Obama. Reagan changed the trajectory of America in a way that Richard Nixon did not, and in a way that Bill Clinton did not. The history also led Obama to reject the advice of his first Treasury Secretary that their legacy should be preventing another depression. Obama said that's not enough. Obama wanted to change the trajectory of America. And in some ways, he did. Some ways I have to agree with him. He did. The division that we see in our country right now is because of Obama's attempt to drag this country farther and farther to the left. And those people on the left, really in the radical left, have now become loud and angry and passionate and want the country to do that, and they're being pushed by Obama. So that's where I kind of agree with this guy in some ways. But this is what he says. It wasn't enough because of the depth of the country's problems, soaring inequality, unregulated Wall Street, underperforming schools, millions lacking health insurance, climate change. More than a few times during Obama's presidency, he has seemed to be following the pattern of liberal disappointment. The left would despair he was too soft. But then he says later, and he says this is also according to a new book, the scale of Obama's domestic policy on health care, taxes, finance, climate, civil rights, and education simply will not disappear. That even though Trump might be able to reverse some of these things, the debate has changed, and it will be extremely difficult to do those things. Now let's go over some of so-called Obama's accomplishments that he's pointing out here. This is why he's such a successful Democrat. Soaring inequality. He addressed soaring inequality. Inequality has gotten worse under Obama. Now, that's not necessarily a bad thing. We keep saying it's an awful thing, but the main reason inequality has gotten worse is because more people have become rich. But you talk about soaring inequality, it's gotten worse under Obama. Unregulated Wall Street. Well, he's talking about Dodd-Frank. We're going to talk about the failure of that later. Underperforming schools. The best thing that has helped a lot of these underperforming schools is not Common Core, it's school choice. School choice is the opposite of what Obama promoted, and he's been trying to destroy it. Millions lacking health insurance, talking about Obamacare. Obamacare will be repealed. Now, I'm hoping the Republicans will fully repeal it. That's where I'm skeptical. But the fact that they're willing to do it shows that there's major problems with Obamacare. That's part of the reason why Trump was elected. And then he says climate change. According to the same scientist that says we're having climate change, it's still getting warmer and nothing's really changed. Except now, because of massive subsidies, I guess solar panels are a little bit cheaper. But so he tries to name accomplishments, but there's not any real accomplishments. It's not about, and his article is all about this, it's not so much about things he's actually accomplished, but his idea of what he is and what he wanted to do that makes him so great. And it's like, that's not what makes a president great. What makes a president great is what he actually does, what he actually accomplishes. He ends this article by saying, when future historians look back on today, they are likely to come to a similar conclusion. They are also likely to believe that Obama's vision of America was far superior to Trump's. We'll see. We'll see. I'm not so sure about that. I think Trump is going to become a lot more popular than people realize. After all, a vast majority of Americans born in the last few decades share Obama's vision. And history is ultimately written by the young. Not necessarily, actually. It's not. And our founders were, some were young, but some were not very young. But you talk about, see, it's his vision, not anything he actually accomplished. But not only that, I run into a lot of young people. I'm usually surprised, actually, how many young conservatives there are out there. I've talked to some recently, and they'll tell me the reason why they're conservative is because they've seen how big government has destroyed their opportunity for my generation and the younger generation. They see it. They see how big government's destroyed it. Yet they want Obama's vision? I would not be so sure. If Trump is able to get this economy going again, and really get it going again, not these measly 1% GDP growth rates while everyone's underemployed and stuff like that. If he really gets it growing again, people are not going to remember Obama as this great president, even though there will be many historians that will try to put him in that way. He will not be remembered as a president who accomplished a lot. He will be remembered as someone who tried to be a moral teacher, but that's not the job as a president. Now, so that's why I think he's mostly a failed Democrat. But the biggest reason why he's really a failed Democrat is because the Republicans have destroyed the Democrat Party in races all over the country. In fact, under Obama's term, the Democrats have lost 1,042 state and federal Democratic posts, including congressional and state legislative seats, governorships, and the presidency. So now the Republicans control both houses of Congress and the presidency. They control most of the country in governorships, and the Democrats have lost many, many, many seats on the local level. You know, at least with FDR, he talks about the most successful Democrat since FDR. At least with FDR, his popularity spread to the lower seats and spread to Congress because they liked what he did. Obama, it hasn't spread it. People like Obama personally. They think he's a nice guy. They think he's funny. They could hang out with him. But they don't like what he's doing to the country, and they don't think he's exactly a successful president. Do you guys agree or disagree? 407-916-5400. Text to 23680. When we get back, we're going to go over some of Obama's biggest, boondoggles. This is Beyond Reason Radio. I'm your host, Michael Yaffee. We'll be right back.
You want to listen to Beyond Reason Radio live on your smartphone? Download the Beyond Reason Radio app now. Available in the Google Play or Apple App Stores. The place where we talk faith, culture, and politics. Beyond Reason Radio continues.
So, Obama trying to, I don't know, shore up his legacy. I don't know how this helps his legacy at all. Decided he was going to commute the sentence of Bradley Manning or Chelsea Manning, her sentence. I don't know what to call him, her, or whatever. But he decided to commute the sentence. Now, everyone knows who he is. He helped leak stuff to WikiLeaks that hurt our national security a lot. By the way, this is Beyond Reason Radio. I'm your host, Michael Yaffee. You all know this already. You all know this. So we'll move on. But Obama commuted this sentence. This is part of Obama's legacy. We're going to go over some other things in his legacy. I found a great countdown list of the worst things that he has done, and we're going to get to that in a minute. You know me. I love countdowns, so we have to do countdowns. So we'll do that as we go through the last day of Obama. The last day of Obama. Tom Benson's got a big smile in the control room as I say last day of Obama. But before we get to that, I found this quick cut from Charles Krauthammer on Fox News, who had something to say, which I just found amusing, about Chelsea Manning, Bradley Manning, whatever her name is, being commuted. This is what Charles Krauthammer has to say about that.
I'm just hoping that in the next 48 hours, Obama doesn't return Alaska to the Russians. After all, it was an unfair deal. Look, I think it's a disgrace what he did. There was not exactly a groundswell for Chelsea Channing, and I think people know how many people were put in danger. We're talking about Afghan villagers who chose our side over the other, were betrayed by these 500,000 Afghan and Iraqi reports. We know, reported by Jennifer Griffin and by others, particularly here, that there was a Taliban killing spree after the release when they went after people who fit the description of those helping us. This is murder. This is treason. And Obama expresses sympathy. Oh, the sentence was too long originally. A generation ago, someone who did that on that scale would have been hanged. The 35 years was an act of mercy and restraint. The idea that you would let him go sends exactly the wrong message. We are going to have engagements throughout the world, twilight struggles like these. People in the villages are going to have to decide, do I join the Americans or do I inform against the Americans? Anyone who hears about this, how lenient we are with someone who betrays his country and betrays them, is going to think twice about ever helping us.
All right, so I just love his comment at first. You know, I guess Obama's gonna maybe give up Alaska at the end of it, because it's just, I just thought it was funny, because you're right. Why is he seemingly knowingly going against our national security? Is that his goal? Is his goal to, I guess it is, to undermine national security? Why else would you commute his sentence? Not only that, but we've been told for weeks that WikiLeaks is the devil because they helped get Trump elected, apparently. But now he commutes somebody's sentence who leaked national security stuff to WikiLeaks? What is happening? This is, I mean, it's one of the weirdest things, but this is all a part of that crazy Obama legacy. It really is. All right, so I decided we were going to do a countdown. Tom Benson, I found this on the Daily Wire. The dailywire.com, good site. I have reporters on from them a bunch of times, and I was like, well, they have a countdown of the 9 worst Obama things he's done in his presidency. And I thought, I love a good countdown, a good Beyond Reason countdown. So I figured we would go through it, and producing for me today, Tom Benson. I mean, there's definitely a lot more than 9 things. It's always laughable, too, when you talk about Obama tries to say he's scandal-free. I mean, we could just name, I could just name 10 things off my head right now if I wanted to. IRS, spying on reporters, Benghazi, Fast and Furious. Those are just 4 right there. But anyway, I thought we'd go through some policy failures of him because it is Obama's last day, which every time I say that, Tom Benson smiles. Okay, countdown starting at number 9.
Obama's 9 worst domestic policy blunders. Number 9. Undermining separation of powers.
Yes, undermining separation of powers. We pretty much know all of that. A lot of it has to do with his executive order. Time and again, Obama has used his pen and phone, which he bragged about all the time. He bragged about all the time, to bypass Congress and use executive orders as a substitute for legislation while empowering the executive branch with a myriad of onerous regulations that have the force of law. Now, that is a big deal when it comes to Trump's presidency. I mean, he recently, just a few weeks ago, took more land under the Iniquities Act. This is the federal government taking land than any president since Teddy Roosevelt. He's just done it. That's just one example. What he's tried to do through the EPA, through immigration, other things, it's a complete disaster. Now, this next one I would probably put higher on the list, but what is number 8?
Number 8, skyrocketing national debt.
Yes, this is almost like number 1 to me, but it's unbelievable. Obama has increased the fiscal operating debt by $9.3 trillion. Took from our nation's founding until 2008 to accomplish that much. So he's increased it more than all the presidents before him combined. Now, he acts like, he's separate from that. It happened despite him. Now, the Republicans in Congress have some to blame for this too. But Obama, his proposed budgets were a lot more than what he actually spent. So it could have been a lot worse, believe it or not, which is just crazy in itself. The national debt. And I have actually a story on Trump later that we'll get to if we have time about how Trump wants to tackle that, which makes me actually very, very, very happy. Okay, what's next, Tom Benson?
All right, Obama's 9 worst domestic policy blunders. We're down to number 7. Net neutrality.
Yeah, net neutrality. I don't want to get too big into that. It can get a little in the weeds, but basically he wants to regulate the internet, because it's really unregulated by the federal government. And, of course, if it's unregulated by them, he has to stick his fingers in it as well. So there you go. Next one, Mr. Tom Benson.
This is number 6, the bailout of General Motors and Chrysler.
Yeah, this is unbelievable. And you know what? I'm looking into this a little bit, reading the story here. I found out a little bit more that I did not realize. Obama used $80 billion in taxpayer money to bail out GM and Chrysler, which lawlessly divested secured creditors of their rightful place in line to be paid and basically took over car industries. As a whole, taxpayers lost an estimated $9.3 billion on the bailout. This may have been less than the government had expected, but Obama has claimed that auto companies have now repaid taxpayers every dime and more of my administration invested in. That was actually earned mostly false from PolitiFact. But the other problem with it is if they did not bail them out, you would have had Ford, Hyundai, other car companies that build in the U.S. probably could have grown and probably could have created more jobs in this country if you would have let the free market work. But instead, we had to bail out basically a failing car company, and now it is worse for the economy as a whole. Okay, what's next, Tom Benson?
The countdown continues, and we don't stop until we get to number 1. But right now, we're on number 5. Number 5, domestic failure, Common Core.
Common Core, yes, is a complete domestic failure. It was partly passed by Republicans as well, federalizing education. And the biggest reason why it's a failure is because it's unpopular. So that's the only good part about it is it's very unpopular and will probably be easier to be repealed in a lot of the states. So, but we'll see. We'll see what happens. Okay, let's go to number 4.
Number 4, nationalizing the student loan program.
This has been unbelievable because we know student loans have been going up. It has been going up because of government intervention, yet he did the opposite of what they should do. He totally nationalized the program. It is now a government monopoly, and, what has happened? Prices have skyrocketed. Unbelievable how this has worked. Okay, we're almost to number one, Tom Benson.
Number three. Number three, the stimulus bill.
Yes, the stimulus bill, which pretty much started the Tea Party movement in this country. One of the first things Obama did while in office was ram through that stimulus bill, $825 billion. All it did is increase the debt, pretty much didn't do anything else. It kind of goes in line with the debt policy and how much of a failure that is. We all know how much of a disaster government spending, but people forget as well that most of that was built into every budget since then until the sequester cuts. So it wasn't just that one time. They spent that much every year until the sequester cuts, and that's why we have a huge debt now. Massive disaster. Okay, we're almost there. Number two.
Number two. This deals with the financial sector. Dodd-Frank.
Oh, Dodd-Frank. And they love it. They think it saved the economy. No, all it did was save big banks while pretty much putting smaller banks out of business. They've been basically squeezing smaller community banks out of business and spawned the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, which has unbridled power to run roughshod over the financial industry. And I think you all probably have a good idea of what number one is.
Here it is. Number one. Obamacare.
Yes, Obamacare, number one. The big disaster, but luckily we'll probably be able to repeal this. Been getting into a lot of debates on healthcare in this country. And you know what? I'm not going to address it too much in this show, but it's been a major disaster. And in a future show, probably next week, I'm going to really go over why government healthcare is a major failure. I have a lot of facts on that. I have a lot of opinions on that. I have a philosophy on that and everything. And we're going to go over that. It's going to be a big deal in the probably next week sometime. I'm going to do a whole show on Obamacare, on government healthcare, and all that stuff. But Obama is leaving tomorrow, so we can put all these things, yes, all these things in the countdown behind us. This is Beyond Reason Radio. I'm your host, Michael Yaffee. We'll be right back.
You know what's Beyond Reason? Yaffee is now on YouTube. Go to YouTube now and just search Beyond Reason Radio. This is Orlando's Smart Talk Radio. Beyond Reason Radio continues now.
Oh, this hour went by really quick, actually. So, Tom Benson, I got a text in from someone who says, you are the countdown king. So I thought you'd appreciate that.
Well, thank you.
This is Beyond Reason Radio. I'm your host, Michael Yaffee. If you missed any of the show, this Inauguration Eve show edition of Beyond Reason Radio, you can catch the podcast anywhere podcasts are available. Make sure to send me a friend request on Facebook as well. So we talked about Obama's failed legacy, but it's time now to move on. Obama's getting out. He's getting kicked out the door. Hit the road, Jack, all that stuff. And talk about Trump for a sec. As you know, I've said Trump's a mixed bag. He wasn't conservative enough for me in the primary. He said some things that worried me. I didn't think he was going to be someone who really wanted to cut the size of government. I never saw any proof of that in the primary. Well, The Hill has a story out, and if this is true, and this actually happens, I might become the biggest Trump fan on the planet, believe it or not. I might actually do that, because this is a big issue for me. And, well, here's the report from thehill.com.
Donald Trump is ready to take an axe to government spending. Staffers for the Trump transition team have been meeting with career staff at the White House ahead of Friday's presidential inauguration to outline their plans for shrinking the federal bureaucracy. The Departments of Commerce and Energy would see major reductions in funding, with programs under their jurisdiction either being eliminated or transferred to other agencies. The Departments of Transportation, Justice, and State would see significant cuts and program eliminations. Overall, the blueprint being used by Trump's team would reduce federal spending by $10.5 trillion over 10 years.
Okay, first I want to say The Hill should hire me to read their news stories because I would make them a lot more exciting. And he said inauguration wrong, like I used to. He said inauguration. It's not inauguration, it's inauguration. I have to do the hand motion, like a hand motion when I say it. It helps me say it right.
Sure, for emphasis.
But this makes me very, 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 very happy. because this has been a big deal to me, and it really frustrated me when Rand Paul pointed out that the Republicans are passing a budget that increases the debt over 10 trillion years. Now, they focused on repealing Obamacare, but it still increases the debt. And it makes me very upset because it's probably the biggest threat to our future, our national security, everything. You can't sustain a $20 trillion debt. And if it goes up to like 30 trillion, I mean, you can't sustain that. It's unheard of. You can't even comprehend the amount of money that is, the amount of debt that is. But according to reports out, Trump wants to cut federal spending by $10.5 trillion over 10 years. Now, I have a feeling this is like Rand Paul at work, because they've been actually talking, and maybe Rand Paul's getting to him, which would makes me very happy. Maybe that's what you have to do. Rand Paul had a great plan to balance the budget in 10 years, but he wants to cut it by $10.5 trillion over 10 years. He wants to privatize public broadcasting. I'm totally fine with that. And he wants to totally get rid of the National Endowment for the Arts and National Endowment for the Humanities, which this will be extremely difficult to pass in Congress, which is a shame because it's not the role of government. I'm pretty sure art survived for most of this country before we had the National Endowment for the Arts. I'm pretty sure art will do okay. We don't need the government being an art. But if he can somehow do this and cut, because this doesn't just cut spending, but it cuts the role of government, I'll become a much, much bigger Trump fan than you have ever seen me come before. This has been another exciting, fast edition of Beyond Reason Radio here on News Radio 102.5 WFLA. If you miss any of the show, check out the podcast at BeyondReasonRadio.com or the Beyond Reason Radio app. We'll be on tomorrow night at 7 p.m. Tomorrow, 7 p.m. after inauguration. That night, we'll go over the inauguration. We'll go over a bunch of other stuff as well. Your voice of reason. We'll sift through everything, everywhere that is beyond reason. I'm your host, Michael Yaffee. I'll catch you next time.
Oh, well,